Hi, everyone. I think we're live. Thank you so much for joining us on Facebook this evening. I'm McKenna. I'm the owner of Murder by the Book in Houston, and I'm so excited to be joined by two of my favorite people. We've got Lisa Unger here to talk about her brand new release, and we've got Abby Endler of the wonderful crime fiction blog and Instagram account, Crime by the Book. So for those of you who have watched our events with guest moderators, you know what's going to happen. Away and leave them to chat for a little bit. And then if you have questions, make sure to pop them in the comments. I'll be responding to them. We'll also have a link below where you can purchase copies of the book. But for now, let me go ahead and get Lisa and Abby introduced, and we'll get on with the show. Lisa Unger is the New York Times best-selling novels. Her books are published in 26 languages with millions of readers worldwide. In 2019, she received 2 Edgar Award nominations, an honor held by only a few writers, including Agatha Christie. Her work has been voted Best of the Year or Top Picks by Today, People, Good Morning America, Entertainment Weekly, Amazon, IndieBound, and many others. She's written for the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, NPR, and Travel and Leisure. She lives in Florida with her family. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, McKenna.
We also have a very long history. Lisa's daughter, who is now older than I can imagine, used to come to the store as a baby. So it was nice chance catching up for a few minutes before this. We're also joined, as you can see, by Abby Endler of Crime by the Book, which is an award-winning crime fiction blog. She runs an amazing Instagram account. She chats with authors. She does fabulous book reviews. If you're not following her, you need to be. How are you tonight, Abby?
Oh, thank you so much for the introduction. I feel like I should have paid you for that.
No,
that was so
I
sweet.
mean it.
Thank you.
I mean it.
Thank you so much. Well, it's such a pleasure to be here. Such a fan of your bookstore. Before we went live here, I was just saying I went to college in Houston and I used to come to Murder by the Book all the time. It's an amazing store. And Lisa, I'm such a fan of yours. This is such a pleasure to be able to chat with you this evening.
Thank you. Thanks, Abby.
Well, I am going to go away. I'm going to leave you ladies to it, and I will be back in a little bit with audience questions. Y'all have fun. I can't wait to listen.
Thanks, McKenna.
Bye,
Lisa, oh my gosh, it's so good to see you. First of all, how are you?
I'm good. We're all doing well here. You know, we're sort of muddling through this crazy moment like everybody is. So yeah, but everyone's healthy and, you know, sort of, you know, we're online, all of us. Ocean's still online. I'm online pretty much constantly now, like, you know, via Zoom or some other way. So yeah, we've all just pivoted to this new reality that we're in, right?
Well, I have to say selfishly, this whole, Zoom kind of work from home protocol has been working out really nicely for me because I get to talk with authors like you about your amazing work. And I'm so excited. We have something very special to discuss this evening. We have your brand new book, Confessions on the 745, which just went on sale this week. And it is so good. And I have actually a million questions for you. But I thought maybe to kick this off, maybe you could just tell us, in case there's anyone watching who doesn't know you or your work, how did you get into crime writing? What is your origin story as a crime writer?
Well, you know, it's funny because like I don't feel like I chose to be a writer in the first place. Like I don't remember a time in my life before I wrote. Like I've been writing since I was a kid. Before that, I was, you know, obviously a reader. Most writers are readers first. You know, that's kind of where we fall in love with story in the pages of somebody else's book. And, you know, and also my family traveled a lot when I was a kid. So it was constantly like always the new kid somewhere, you know, and always like sort of feeling a little bit on the outside looking in. So I always like, you know, I feel like my first home, like the first safe place I found was the page, you know, first as a reader and then as a writer. And so, you know, I've always just had that love. And my mom was a librarian. So, of course, she had that love of story. And, you know, my dad, like an avid reader of nonfiction. So, both big readers. So, I've had this, like, sort of heritage of like love of story and love of knowledge and all that stuff. And so, but then, and again, I don't necessarily feel like I chose to write crime fiction or thrillers or mystery or whatever it is we're calling it these days. I've always had a really dark and twisted imagination. You know, it's like I always think to myself, it's like, you know, you're like in the movie theater and there's like the girl and she's, you know, there's a sound in the basement and she's like headed down the stairs, you know, to see what's there. And you're like, no, don't go down the stairs, but of course she has to go down. That's me. I'm the girl going down into the basement to find out what that noise was. And so, I've always just had a lot of questions about the dark side of human nature, and I feel that, and I did have some, I did experience some like sort of, dark things in my childhood that, they in some ways formed me. It made me really question, what makes people do the things that they do. And I think that that's kind of, it's an overriding curiosity and something that runs through, all 18 of my novels.
Absolutely. And I mean, it definitely factors into your new book. So before we go any further in this chat, could you tell folks watching at home, what is Confessions on the 745 about?
Okay, well, it's very loosely based on the great Patricia Highsmith novel, Strangers on a Train. But, only in that like one moment, like just that thought or an idea of like two people connecting on a train. And so, when we first open up Confessions, we meet Selena Murphy, and she's a young mom. She's a working mom, and she's had a really, really bad day, a horrible day. Probably it was the worst day, and she, like it's really bad.
Poor Selena, like it's really bad.
Oh, really? And so, she's on her way home, and she's on her commuter train home. Of course, because she's had this awful day, the train just dies on the track. It stalls. And so she's like, not going to be getting home in time for, the things that she needs to deal with. And so she's sitting there in the dark, and she winds up next to a beautiful stranger. And I don't know, maybe it's the horrible day that she had, or the dark of the train, or the drink that she shouldn't have had. But when this beautiful stranger strikes up a conversation with a confession, it leads Selena to share a dark secret of her own, something that she has never told anybody else. And then, the train comes back to life, and Selena is headed back to her world. And she's really embarrassed. She's like, oh my God, why did I tell this stranger this super personal thing about myself? And she just hopes that she's never going to see the stranger from the train ever again. But she will, of course.
She definitely will. And I have to ask, I mean, I know sometimes authors find this a tricky question to answer, but was there like a particular moment that sparked the inspiration for this story?
Well, there is always something. There's always like a germ. That's how I refer to it. Sometimes it could be like a line of poetry. Sometimes it's a news story. In one case, it was a piece of junk mail. In the case of Confessions on the 745, it was a thought that I had kind of kicking around in my head for a while. And that was, you can't con an honest man. I'm not even sure where I heard this, and I don't know why it became like a point of obsession for me, but I wanted to bring it up on a panel. I was on a panel in New York, and we were in the green room before, and it was I was there with Megan Abbott, among other people, and Megan said, I don't know, because she was, we were chatting about it. She's like, it kind of sounds like victim blaming to me. And I was like, yeah, I hear that. That sounds right. Because it's like overly simplistic as an idea. Right. Nothing about the human psyche is ever simple. And so it led me to start researching the psychology of the con artist and the con. And I found this book called The Confidence Game by Maria Kanikova, and which is a really, fascinating book about, some famous con artists, the structure of, certain common scams, as well as the psychology of the con artist and the mark. And my takeaway from the book was that, like, most of us think we're way too smart to ever fall for any kind of a con or scam. But, the truth is that the more convinced you are that you're not vulnerable, the more vulnerable you actually are. And so it was that book and that the research that I did that led to the idea that you can't con somebody who doesn't want something. And everybody wants something. So everybody's vulnerable. And the con artist is very, very good at knowing exactly what it is you want, maybe even if you don't know it yourself. And so that was the seed or the germ for Confessions on the 745. And then, usually what happens after that is I started hearing a voice or voices. And in this case, it was the voice of Selena and Pearl. These were the characters that drove me through the narrative.
And this book, I mean, well, first of all, I have to say I loved the concept of this con story, because you always hear on the news, oh, there's a new scam going around where people call you and they say, your son has been arrested and we need money immediately, something like that. And it actually happened to someone in my family recently. They did not get conned, but they received that phone call. And it's so alarming how, this person in my family, their first instinct was, oh my gosh, what can I do to help?
Exactly.
Yeah. And you think it can't happen to you. Yeah.
Right.
So I loved that.
And the more empathetic you are as a person, the more likely it is that you are going to be a victim to one of these things. And that's a particularly insidious one, because it's like, they sort of generally target people who are older and, act like, oh, grandma, I need, money or whatever, like whatever it is. And it's just kind of it's not a nice way to move through the world, I wouldn't think.
It's really not. And I think this book does such an amazing job of portraying how people can prey on people's kindness and their weak spots, but weak spots in the sense of wanting love and wanting connection and all that. And I have lots of questions about that as well. But before we move on, we have to talk about Selena, because this is such a character-driven story and readers spend so much time up close and personal with Selena as well as Pearl. And I wonder if you could just kind of introduce these two women, or woman and teenage girl, to folks watching.
Yeah, so Selena is, I think she's probably like a lot of people that we all know. She's this young working mom. She's in this long-term marriage that, even before the, impelling incident in chapter 1, things are not perfect, right? Like the marriage it has some, some deep fractures. And, she's kind of like this, this superwoman that this culture is so good at, producing, like the woman who's got the career and we've got the 2 kids and everybody's lunch is packed and, we have the perfect marriage and the big house in the suburbs and I commute into the city. And it's it's a lot of people that we know. Right. And, and yet, the pressures of that existence are epic. It's like the internal and the external pressures to kind of preserve this facade. And that's very much what it is for Selena is, it's a big weight, it's a big burden. And, a little bit she's, cracking under the pressure of it all. And she's, one of these, she's like a person who, she has this sort of dark thing going on in her life and she can't share it with anybody because, she's created an Instagrammable existence, right? She's like, she even talks about it, it's Graham and Selena, we're the fairy tale couple, we have the perfect Instagram feed, of our beautiful, children and all the wonderful things that we do together as a family. And so she's presented this facade of herself and she's super invested in it. Like she's very, very much so wanting to keep that intact. And even, as things unravel, I think that that's one of the major things that keeps her throughout the book making some pretty bad decisions in general. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Pearl, on the other hand, is, she's very different from Selena. When we first see her, she's a young girl, and she tells pretty early on that her superpower is to be invisible. She's a watcher. She is somebody who wants to not be seen so that she can see when the mask slips and the real person is revealed. This is not uncommon in children who come from abuse. Pearl's mom, Stella, is not abusive, but she's neglectful. And Pearl has been abandoned by her father. She doesn't know who her father is. And she has sort of developed that kind of survival instinct that a lot of neglected or abused children do. She's learned how to survive. And she's learned how to watch people because, Stella is unpredictable. And so, if Pearl's going to get her needs met, then she needs to be able to predict what Stella is going to do. And the only way to do that is by watching. And so that makes her, in a way, even though she thinks she's very powerful and she's very smart and she's very savvy and she's kind of in charge of herself, she's a young girl who's in charge of herself, but it makes her vulnerable to a man that comes into her mother's life, into Stella's life, a man named Charlie. And he is in a relationship with Stella, but it's really Pearl that he's interested in.
Yeah.
And so their relationship unravels, his and Stella's, and yeah.
And it takes some very dark and completely entertaining turns.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I couldn't put this book down. So I've heard you, when you talk about your characters sometimes, and you can correct me if I'm misreading things, but you'll talk about how, the voice kind of comes to you, you hear the voice of the character, and it kind of blows my mind as a reader to think about a character presenting themselves to the author. Like, I just assume that the author is making every decision about the way the character is developing. And I'd love to know your perspective on that. And, do your characters ever surprise you or do unexpected things during the writing process that you wouldn't have seen coming yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I sit down to write, I just have these voices. I have like a kind of a nebulous vibe about the story, like what I, maybe think it could possibly potentially be, like in the vaguest, possible way. And then I have these voices, and I feel like if I'm hearing them, that there's a reason. I wouldn't be hearing the voices if there wasn't something there. So in many ways, like I do experience my characters as if they're people that I meet, and that the story is there and I just have to find it or get them to tell it to me. Right. And so
That's amazing.
This is how I've written every book. I'm sure there's an easier way. I'm positive. I'm positive there is. But I have never been able to do this any other way. This is just how it works for me. So the characters reveal themselves to me on the page. I discover my characters very much so in the same way that my readers discover them. And so there's never I'm never on the outside looking in. I'm always on the inside looking out. I'm never like above the story going, okay, I want this character to do this and I need this to happen so that this can happen. There's literally nothing like that goes on in my head. When I sit down day to day, I don't know who's going to show up. I don't know what they're going to do. I definitely don't know what the book is about. And I, of course, have no idea how it's going to end.
That is wild to me.
Because if I did, I wouldn't be able to write the book. Wouldn't be able to write. Yeah, because why write it?
Yeah,
like I
totally.
write the reason that I read, because I want to know what's going to happen. And so there are a lot of people who write this way, and mostly you find that people who write like this have been writing since they were kids. Most people who write this way, it's like the part of your brain that always told the story never grew up. And that's kind of how, and you find that a lot. And there are plenty of people who do it the completely opposite way. Well, and we could talk about that, because I don't necessarily think it is opposite. It's just like a different structure. But they, so plenty of people plot meticulously, and they have character sketches, and they know everything that's going to happen before they sit down to write. And plenty of people, very, very successful people, do that very well. But I don't think it's a choice. I don't think you either choose to be somebody who plots, or in the case of people who write like I do, like myself, Lisa Gardner, out there, Mary Kubica, all, a lot of people that I know, I like the term gardener.
I like that. Could you explain?
This is a George R.R. Martin term, because like the whole thing is like, oh, plotters versus pantsers.
Yeah,
I hate that, because it's like it almost like it assumes that like you don't know what you're doing, like you just accidentally wrote a book, you're flying by yourself, which is not true. It just happens that the subconscious knows the book better than the conscious mind does. So it's just accessing a different part of your brain. So he came up with this idea of the gardener is like the seed is planted, it grows, you nurture it, you prune it, you water it, you expose it to light, you do all the things that you need to do to keep it healthy and to grow, and then eventually it blooms. And that's how I see it, more than, oh, I hope I get there. It's nothing like that. It's an act of faith that the story is there. And then of course, not for nothing, there is a craft that I have been honing since I was a little kid. My entire education was focused on writing and literature. And, I have written, 18 published novels and short stories. And, this is something that I, every day, what motivates me is that, I believe I can be a better writer than I was yesterday. And
I love that. Yeah.
most of my focus is dedicated to that goal. And that's not pantsing.
Yeah, no, not at all. You're so right.
That's
Yeah.
very purposeful, a lifetime of, joyful work.
Yeah. That's amazing. I love that response so much. And I can only imagine that it has to make the writing process so much fun too, especially a book like this, where, I mean, these characters, like, they reveal themselves to be so many different things over the course of the reading experience. And I can only imagine it must have been a ton of fun to be writing them. And this kind of ties perfectly into my next question for you, which was, I found one of the big themes of this book, you've kind of alluded to it already, but it is kind of talking about the masks that we all wear and the way that we kind of take on and off different identities depending on different situations. And I was curious if you could just speak a little bit to why that topic interested you so much, like what you think made that like sink its teeth into you as you were writing.
Yeah, and that it's not like a new theme. It's not a new theme to this book. Like, it's definitely the layers of identity and what makes us who we are is something that runs through all the work. It's my overriding curiosity. Like, I just have this voracious curiosity about human nature. I want to know what makes people who they are. Is it nature? Is it nurture? Is it, as most people think now, some impossibly complicated helix of all of those things, of both of those things? And so, it's always like my curiosity. It's like, what are the layers of self? And another sort of theme that runs through the work is like just this kind of Jungian idea of the shadow, that where there's light, there's shadow. Whenever you see the brightness, there is also darkness. And so that's something that kind of comes up again and again. And that also ties into like sort of the theme of the mask, or the layers of self. And that's definitely something that figures in very very importantly in Confessions on the 745. And there was another book that I read in the research for this book. It's a book called Lie Spotting by Pamela Meyer is the author. I had read another book about this type of thing a while back by a man named Joe Navarro, a book called What Everybody is Saying. And it's about the physical tells of, people who are lying. And it's super interesting, like the limbic responses of the brain when people are uncomfortable. There's micro expressions, the twitches in the face, the way people hold their shoulders, what they might do with their hair, rubbing their head is a self-comforting gesture. There are all these different things that, that I read in his book that, really kind of illuminated, the way in which the mind-body connection, which I always find incredibly interesting. But in Lie Spotting, she talks a little bit about some of those things too. It's not really so simplistic as like, oh, if somebody looks up and to the right, they're lying.
Yeah, I'm evaluating everything I'm doing now. Like, oh God, like what am I saying?
Watching me. It's not so much about that. It is a little bit about it. That wasn't really my takeaway from the book. What really fascinated me about the book was, her theory that like just basically everybody lies all the time. You lie to each other, you lie to ourselves. We and it's not even out of any nefarious intent or any intention to deceive. You might lie to your husband because he's feeling bad about something and you want to like bolster his ego, or you might lie to yourself because you're so disappointed. Like, I didn't get this job because of X, right? So there's all, it's like it's a reflex, and it's not something that we're thinking about or intending to do. And it's a survival mechanism. It's like you might smile when you feel bad, or if you're afraid, you might smile, or, be polite to somebody who is making you feel uncomfortable or whatever. There's all these different ways and layers that we lie to each other and to ourselves, and there's 1,000 reasons why. And that also ties into the idea of the mask. Like, what mask have you put on today to go to work? Or what mask did you put on to get on the train? Or what mask did you put on, like, okay, I've had a horrible day at work, but I got to go home to my family and be happy for my kids because they need me. Like, that is a thing that we all do, whether we realize that we're doing it or not.
Absolutely. And, something that also stood out to me a lot, and it does factor into this book, and it also is just something that factors a lot into my life. And I was thinking about social media, and I mean, the con, I'm not going to say anything, no spoilers, I promise, but a decent amount of like con activity does involve, looking at people's profiles online, and there's also the thread of Selena, like you said, and what she's portraying about herself on social media. And I guess I wondered, for you as a writer, I mean, writing a 21st century con novel, how much were you like factoring this like modern technology into your writing?
Oh, it's huge. I mean, and that's we could probably spend an hour talking about the role of technology in fiction. But in this case, it's huge. I mean, we have essentially given ourselves away, right? Like, we've given away our privacy. Like, if you have not really assiduously guarded your privacy settings on social media, then you are telegraphing virtually everything about yourself, not just to con men, but to advertisers, right? Like, I mean, it's just the base case situation. Like, they know everything you're doing. They know where you live. They know where you shop. They know where your kid goes to school. They know where you work. They know who your friends are. They know where you went to dinner last Friday, probably home in this case, but generally speaking, they know where, they know what glass you were holding up and what wine was in it when you took that picture with your friends and, mom's night out or whatever, right? Like, they know everything. And anybody looking at your social media feeds, if it's not guarded and protected, anybody can find out a million things about you that you don't even realize that you are telegraphing. And so that is a big feature in this book. Also, the idea of this self that we project, right? Like, there is this very filtered, curated, cropped, self that we put out there for everybody. And we all know the truth, which is that real life is lived in the moments between your Instagram posts. That's the real life. That's the real self. That's the flawed, the dark, like, life. Not that real life is flawed and dark. Of course, it's the full rainbow of human experience, right? It's like all light, all dark, whatever. Oh, I'm so in love with my husband. Oh my God, the dog is puking. It's 4 a.m. I'm not going to get any sleep. Like, I mean, I love my child so much. Oh my God, if she, puts one more dirty dish in the sink, my head's going to explode. Like, it's the full rainbow of human experience. And so the social media, I mean, as I see it in many ways, is the ultimate, like, sort of mask. It's the ultimate lie. And, if we're inauthentic in that space, and, and we are, then we're making it harder on everybody else, because then everybody else feels that they also have to present this, very perfect image of who they are. And, it's more complicated, of course, for you or for me, because this is our work and our job in many ways. But it's definitely something that I've been exploring a lot. Technology in general, what is that phone doing to us? What is it doing to our brains? What is it doing to our concentration? How, like, maybe not for you, you're a lot younger than me, but for me to go out, to be in an airport and see every single person staring at a screen, every single person. Like, maybe not some boomers, maybe are reading a hardcover book or whatever, like Gen X, which is me. Like, some of us are like, we're still fighting the good fight against the devices or whatever. So we may actually try to read a magazine every once in a while, like, I spared myself some screen time. But like, it's a real it's a real problem because people have stopped looking. They're not looking at anything anymore. They are absorbed in this device. They are super consumers. That's what they want from you. That's what the phone wants from you. It wants your attention. It wants your time. It wants you to spend your money always. Even when you're in your pajamas in bed, you could still be shopping.
Yeah.
Once upon a time, this was not the case. These many years ago. So so this is something that I'm always really super interested in, like texting, like how has that stripped down our communication? Like how do we and how do we disseminate information to each other with the phone? And that has sort of worked its way into I think a lot of books. Texting is a way that we communicate with each other. And then what happens, that phone has got to run out of charge at some point within the plot of your book.
I love it.
No,
she can't be charging it all the time, I guess.
I know. Because she has that moment like where towards the end where her phone is dying and she's like, in mortal danger, but still trying to find the charger so that she can so that she can get it charged up. And it's like, we've all been there, right? We've all been in that moment. Oh my God, I only have, 1% left. How am I gonna, make it to the
a 21st century nightmare.
But it was interesting because like last year I got asked this question about technology, about the stranger inside. And, the person who asked the question was like, almost like implying that, by using texting within the plot of the book, that it was almost like a cheat, right? Like that I was, cheating in the way that I was conveying information. And I was like, are you kidding? I mean, how inauthentic is it to have any communication that doesn't involve at least some texting now? I mean, that is how we connect with each other most often right now.
Totally.
So,
it's really funny. I had the exact opposite reaction to the way like texting is woven into the story, the way social media is woven into the story. To me, it just tracked, like this felt real. If I were the person trying to do X,
right.
I would be texting. I would be looking at their Facebook page. Like that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, that's what we do now. I mean, that's what we do even if we're not actively stalking somebody. Which I
mean, hopefully we're not doing, just to be clear.
We're not actually we're not actually stalking people. I mean, that's something that, we're all doing. And that's something that, is a matter of course for like employers. It's like, I always tell Ocean about this, I tell her, don't ever post anything. We've been really strict with her about, she only had a phone as of last year. She only very recently got social media. But, we tell her, don't ever imagine that anything that you've posted is private. Don't imagine that it's not going to be a place where your employers look for you. When you come to apply for a job, they're going to scan your social media feeds and see what kind of a person they're going to determine what kind of a person you are from what you have posted.
Absolutely. And it's such a double-edged sword, because like I've had such a positive experience with social media. I'm very fortunate that and same for you, like as an author, it's such a crucial thing when you're trying to connect with readers. And but it really is, there's a dark side to it, that light and dark thing there. I mean, it's so true. It really is.
I think it's interesting. Like Cal Newport, who wrote a book called Deep Work, talks about this a lot. He talks about technology as a tool, which it is. I mean, it's certainly a tool, but it is, it's a tool that conspires to like sort of get your attention all the time. So it's not like a hammer necessarily where you only go get it when you need it. It's always like trying to get your attention, right? But if you approach it with intention, if you approach it with intention and you use social media and technology in the ways that augment what is very important to you in your life, then you can use it to good effect and it will not use you.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, and that's something we all, I think should, be thinking about and hopefully working towards, like, use it. It's a tool, I mean, just even like, the GPS, the maps, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
I probably couldn't even get to the grocery store now without without that thing, right? But like, you use it as a tool, and you set your intention for how you're going to use things, and then it doesn't use you. But it's a process, because it's, it really is, very very attractive. Of course your brain
It is.
loves those dopamine hits, like, ooh, yay.
Oh my gosh, it really is. And I could talk about this subject literally for the rest of the night, but really quick, I will recommend the Social Dilemma on Netflix if anyone's looking for a great documentary about this.
Absolutely.
So good. So good.
So
but back to your book now, Lisa, before I keep talking about social.
Right. Stay on point.
I was really curious. I mean, I love that your books put these characters who are like every people, every women in this case, in a lot of ways, they put them in these extraordinary situations. And I was wondering if you could speak to why that style of suspense writing attracted you for this story, rather than making this a story simply about a detective on the hunt for a con person.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I always think that, so I think when I look back at my life, like as a reader, the first thriller that I ever read, the first true thriller was Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. And that really has that big theme of like the ordinary girl, the young, like sort of naive girl caught in like an extraordinary, in this case, sort of gothic scenario, right?
Yeah.
And there's something about that it's definitely something that has, come up again and again in most of my novels. And I tend to access the story. I mean, I do 100% access the story through character voice. And so that's the only way that I can tell the story is through the character. Like all plot flows from character. So, in the case in this book, there actually is a detective who has been sort of on the hunt. He's got his like sort of, his file full of cold cases, and he's like, he has a role. There's for me, the interesting part is the character, the layers of the character, how the story unfolds from their perspective, and what new things we can discover about human nature, human psyche, and real people. Like I think that most of us, when we pick up a book, certainly, the detective genre is, something that many of us have loved, and there are so many great books like that. But I mean, primarily for me, like I'm looking to get into the heart of character, and it's not so much about the crime or the hunt for the perpetrator. It's about why, about who the crime, why this crime, who is this criminal, where did this person come from? Because there's always this like sort of idea in fiction that like, here's the good guy and here's the bad guy. And, I just don't really see things that way. There's there's like, oh, the criminal mastermind and the cop is on the hunt for this criminal. I have to be honest, there are not that many criminal masterminds. There just really aren't. There's like there's a lot of brutalized, damaged, addicted people who grow up to, commit horrible crimes. And usually they come from, a place of abuse or trauma or even head injury. And, there are a lot of reasons why people do the wrong thing. There are a lot of reasons why people commit crimes. And this is, certainly not acting as an apologist for criminals or to say that, there's any excuse for hurting other people. But I think that it does us some good to look at, the layers of what makes, somebody a bad actor, somebody who is going to do the wrong thing or, commit the crime or run the scam. Where is that person coming from? And so that's always what I'm interested in as a writer.
I love that. And it's so funny because when I was like reading this book, I was doing a little Q&A on Instagram and someone asked me, what are the qualities you love in a thriller? And for me, I said the number one thing is character. That's what I'm like. An intriguing plot concept will bring me to a book, but I'm sticking around for the characters. And I loved the way in this book you are truly you're peeling back all these layers of these people, and by the end of the book, some of the people you think are straight up terrible, you kind of have sympathy for them. Some of the people you think are pure and good and great, they've got some dark stuff going on too. So I loved that. And I'm curious, as a writer who is, as you said, you're experiencing the story in the same way that you're writing it, how do you actually approach, like, technically writing these stories where you are kind of going back in time and learning about the character's origin? And when I don't want to say this with any spoilers, but you know what I mean? Like when the character's origin story is being kind of revealed throughout the book itself. How do you approach that?
Yeah, it's funny because I recently was talking to the artist who is currently adapting Crazy Love You for a graphic novel.
Wow.
And he said to me, he goes, you realize that you have 3 timelines in this book? There's the present, there's the past, and then there's the meta concept of the actual graphic novel that's happening within the novel. I was like, do I? He's like, yeah. He goes, how did you do that? I said, I have no idea.
Gosh.
And I actually had to go back and look at it and think, wow, he's right. There really are 3 timelines here. And so for me, the story always evolves pretty close to the way it's on the page. In the editorial phase, things might get moved around some, or, mainly it's going to be a lot of fleshing out. It'll be like, after discussion with my editor, this is working, this is not working, why isn't it working? How could it work better? Like all of this stuff. There's of course an editorial process where I make sure that, everybody comes along for the ride, that it's not just about me. In fact, it's not about me at all. It's about the story. It's about the reader, so there is a point, but that first draft, it evolves very much, the way you see it on the page. And so when, it's not like a moment where, I'm like, oh, we've got to go back into the backstory now, or, oh, I need to insert some action here so that we're moving forward. There's no thought like that ever. It's, for me, I sit down to write, and the things evolve on the page. And then at some point, I'm just going to hit a wall. I'm going to hit a wall, and I'm just going to be sitting there. Stay there for a while. You kind of get the feeling that, things are not going to work. We're not working. It's not happening. So we're going to, like, God forbid, don't go on social media, go for a walk, cook, make a pie, do a load of laundry. And then while you're doing that other thing, I will hear the next voice. I know what the next place is that I need to go. And that's where I go. And so that's very much the process. And so, when the timelines are different, when there's 2 separate timelines that are at some point going to converge, like I just follow that, from the character voice. That's just kind of how how the story will tell itself to me. And so but you have to wait, like, it's an organic process. And so there's an ebb and a flow. And when it's flowing, great, everybody's happy when it's flowing. And then when there's an ebb, then you have to respect that ebb as well, like as a moment where things are gestating, for lack of a better word, and you're going to have to just be patient. And that's the faith part of writing a novel. The story's there, it will get told. It's just a matter of how.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I think we have time for maybe one more of my questions before we open it up to audience questions here. And I have so many left. I got to be selective here. I think I'm going to choose. Okay, I'm just curious to know. I mean, obviously this year, unprecedented, what we're all facing right now. I mean, how has it been, having your novel published this fall? How has your experience been? This is your pub week. How's everything going?
It's actually going really well. It's interesting. This is a dark time. This is a really, really hard time for a lot of people, and people are suffering in truly significant ways. They've lost loved ones, they've lost their job. It's easy to forget, from a position of relative comfort and privilege, how hard this moment is for so many people. And so, to be completely honest, I honestly just feel blessed that my family is healthy, and I have never wanted to do anything else with my life. So I always feel really blessed and grateful and excited when my book publishes. I know there's been a lot of talk about, book publishing during a pandemic, and I know that, certainly there are challenges, but, I'm just truly grateful to have a book published at all, and to have people who want to read it, and, people enjoying it, and being able to talk to you and other people about the work is very meaningful to me. And so I feel really blessed. However, we get to do that, whether we were doing it together in a store in New York, or whether I can, hang out at Murder by the Book which is a store which I haven't been to in a long time, because, there are physical limitations to the book tour. I am a physical person. I'm a body that has to be moved expensively from one place to the next.
Yep.
And, there are certain limitations to how many places you can go. So in this moment, I think McKenna was saying earlier that, the store pivoted to being online. I pretty early pivoted as well to being online, and, have been kind of grateful to be able to connect with readers in this way. Like, some people have never been able to come to a book signing before.
Totally.
For all different reasons, maybe there's a physical limitation, or maybe you have a small kid at home, or you're caring for an elderly parent, and your life is just not your own, right? And you can't go out for an evening and, go to a bookstore and hang out with an author that you like who happens to be in town. Like, not everybody has that kind of freedom. So now they have this new way of being able to connect. And I think that's really special. And there are people who have been reading my books, for 20 years. And I'm connected with them through my newsletter and through, through obviously every possible social media platform.
Social media.
Social media. And so I've been connected with them for all this time. And of course, I am missing that, sort of physical, being able to touch and hug and say hi and sign the book for a person who's standing in front of me. But in another way, I'm getting to hang out with people in this way that I haven't ever been able to see or talk to. And that's really special.
I agree with you. I think there are silver linings to this. And I think that for us readers, we're so thankful to have amazing books like yours coming out that can give us that entertainment.
Yeah,
and that
it's like a little escape hatch. You just go inside here. And you don't have to worry about anything else for a while.
Literally. Clear your calendar. It's actually a problem. I was needing to do some reading for work one night, and I couldn't put this down. It was actually a problem.
Thank you. I love that. I love that so much. I love it when people are up late, they didn't get enough sleep, they didn't make dinner, they missed their stop on the train. That's good. Those are all good things as I see them.
Well, I hate to interrupt this because I could sit back and listen to you two talk for much longer. But you can talk. I wasn't worried, rightfully so. So I do want to thank Abby. As many of you know, having seen a lot of our events, we try to make sure that these events are moderated with knowledgeable people. If it's not guest moderators, it's us trying to make sure the questions are relevant and tailored to the book. And Abby, of course, always does a wonderful job. So I'd like to thank her for being such a great moderator. She made it look easy, and it's not the easiest thing in the world. So great job, Abby.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Such a pleasure.
Well, you're welcome anytime. So we do have some questions. Before we get to those, I'll mention that if you tuned in late to this, you can always come back as soon as the video is done and watch it from the beginning here on Facebook Live, and I'll get it uploaded to YouTube hopefully tomorrow. So for people who don't have Facebook, if you want to share it with them on YouTube, that'll be available. We also have a few pretty cool events coming up. We have Lisa Jewell in conversation with Ruth Ware, your friends Althea Burke and Michael Connelly in conversation coming up, John Grisham, Lee Child, lots of big names coming up in the next few weeks. So Check out murderbooks.com, our event calendar. We've got everything on there, or all the events are up on Facebook Live right now. But back to Lisa and confessions on the 745. So Catherine would like to know, what would you like readers to take away from this book?
Well, I mean, I definitely want you up past your bedtime. I definitely want a lot of, gasping. I definitely want that. And, I hope that, it gives people a little respite from everything that's going on right now, that it entertains and engages you, but also that, after the book is closed, you're thinking about the characters and what happened to them and who they really are, long after you're done with the story.
Great. We also have a question from same Catherine. As soon as I opened up Facebook to check that this was going, there were already questions from Catherine. She had them ready. And I know you've already answered. So you've already mentioned Rebecca and Patricia Highsmith, but what authors or books have inspired your writing?
Yeah, so I've been like sort of, a writer and a reader all my life, and I've been a literary omnivore, so I've read like just sort of wildly across all genre. But, early things that inspired me, I think I always come back to Truman Capote. His like sort of vignettes and short stories, like books like, Music for Chameleons and Other Voices, Other Rooms. Like that's the place where as a pretty young reader, I kind of fell in love with language. And I fell in love with, how he was able to create these sort of portraits of people and places, and just this, really poetic, like, just deep kind of exploration of human nature. And so that really was an early influence for me. And then, of course, I read way too early In Cold Blood, which was, the first sort of, it's the first true crime book, I think, ever. And, he kind of, in a weird way, gave me permission to be who I was, because he was able to explore this incredibly dark event and these, these really sort of irredeemable men who committed this murder in Kansas. And he did it with such tremendous beauty and compassion. And, I kind of aspire to that, to be able to explore the darkness with that much empathy. And so in a way, it kind of, it gave me permission to be both the writer and like the kind of thinker that I am, about just like my dark imagination and curiosity and stuff. And just as a writer, there are certain books that are so important to me, like On Writing by Stephen King, which is a book I go back to again and again. Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott. There's Jack whining. Can you hear it? Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott, and A Lie That Tells the Truth by John Dufresne. And so those are all books on craft and the industry and, the writing life. And I kind of feel like they're all like these kind of talismans. Like I can, open any one of them at like any page, and, whatever I'm reading there is going to give me like a little boost or a little inspiration when I'm feeling, stuck or, just need a little jolt.
It's funny you should mention that about In Cold Blood. We still hand sell that title all the time. People don't know of it, or they come in as, true crime podcast fans, and they want something true crime, so we give that to them. But Sally, who works at the bookstore, has said for years that book, when she read it, made her afraid of everything in life, because if what happened could happen in a rural Kansas, then it could happen anywhere. And so, she says that while selling it to people.
That's what makes them buy it. This scared me for about everything in life. Yeah, it's such an amazing story. Like, it's like this completely like just, isolated farmhouse. So like the Clutter family was like, the most innocent, like sort of church going, like good, just nice family. And it was just this random moment where, somebody who had worked for the Clutters was, in prison with one of the men that committed this crime. And there was like this idea that they had money in their house, and, they didn't. And it was, it's just such a gripping
sad and, human story, but, he really did go back into their lives and try to understand them in a way that, I don't think anybody else could have.
Yeah. So obviously we've just covered a bunch of different subgenres, but
Yes.
Dion had a question and I'm going to read it. You can take it where you'd like. Is there another genre that you like to read to step away from thrillers, as I give my dog a rawhide to keep her from scratching me?
Yeah, Jack is like so unhappy, like in general speaking, like, 'cause this is like his time. It's like, this is his time, right?
Yeah. Well, Maisie can't hear anything else, so she thinks if I'm sitting here in the library, then I must be talking to her.
Yeah,
so I
right.
keep having
why
to.
are you?
Who are you talking to? So I just have a steady stream of treats to bribe her anytime I have one of these when my husband's not home to entertain her. Sorry. Okay. So to repeat the question, is there another genre? Yeah. Is there another genre that you like to read to step away from thrillers?
Yeah. Well, so I read a ton of nonfiction. That's that's really where I kind of, it really informs my fiction, and it really kind of, takes me to a different part of my brain. I'm kind of like an information junkie, and I do read, across genre. I love a great story, no matter where it comes from. But nonfiction is really like sort of my go-to when I want to just kind of, expand my knowledge base on something. And I'm currently reading The Biggest Bluff, which is also by Maria Kanikova, who wrote The Confidence Game. And this is her book about how she turned herself into a professional poker player. And so it's a book about poker, obviously, about, how to play poker. It's also a book about the psychology of the game and the players, and, the role of luck versus skill in our lives, and, ability versus chance. And it's just a truly riveting, sort of book about this, this journey that she went on. And she really did turn herself into like a super successful poker player, like a professional poker player. And so that's the kind of thing I love. I mean, and even in that case, it's all about character. Like, character is king, sort of, even in nonfiction. So that's like the kind of, the thing that I go to when I'm not reading, within the thriller genre.
She sounds like someone I'd be worried to meet at a cocktail party, because I wouldn't know what to do with my hands, or like have her overanalyzing every move that I make. Okay, so Tricia would like to know, because of your use of characters to explore ideas of self, is there a character from a previous novel that you wonder about, as in wonder where they are now?
Oh yeah, I actually have a few characters that are always with me, and that I know are going to come back at some point. I just don't know how or where. So, of course, the Hollows, which is my fictional town, is a character for me, and so I think about the Hollows a lot. Eloise Montgomery, who is like sort of my reluctant psychic. Things have taken a somewhat dark turn for her, but it's okay. She's still with me. I still think about her all the time. And her granddaughter, Finley Montgomery, is another character that, that I think about a lot. Jones Cooper. So there are a lot of characters that, I'm still thinking about. And I know at some point they will, they'll have another life. They'll have another, another story. I just don't know when.
Excellent. So I think the last question I have is also from Tricia. What, in your opinion, is the creepiest metaphoric mask that a person wears?
Piety.
Oh, good answer.
Good answer. Yeah. Wow.
Nice.
I really had to think about that, because there's a lot of creepy masks, but that to me is the most frightening. The one who is so, staunchly moral and hiding behind an idea of a certain kind of faith, and offering harsh judgment on others. I tend to think that beneath that mask is something pretty dark.
Yeah. It's That's a great answer. Yeah,
Like,
great answer off the cuff.
That's a great
Well
question.
done, Lisa. It's a good question, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it really is.
So before we break up this fun chat, I want to mention, speaking of creepy, Abby just posted Halloween reads on Crime by the Book today, and she's got some favorites of ours on there. So make sure to check out her blog once again. She's got just fabulous reviews. I am a fan. I love her reading taste. She takes fabulous pictures. The whole thing is a good place to visit. So check out her Halloween reads if you like creepy things other than deceptive masks. With that, I will say once again, new book, Confessions on the 745. We love Lisa. We love her writing. If you haven't gotten it, please get it. We'd love if you get it from us, but do what suits you. I guess that's all for this evening. Thank you both for joining us. Have a good evening.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And Abby, thank you so much. I appreciate you both. You're both you do so much for writers and for readers, and it's just, it's very important, and I appreciate you both so much. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you for letting me be here. This book is amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you both. Good evening. Bye.